All right, so here I want to introduce our panel, starting with Jay Nakagawa. And Jay, would you just refresh the audience a bit about your background?
Sure. I'm with Dell Technologies, Director of Competitive Intelligence. Been doing this for about 10 years. Prior to that, my career is primarily in product management, although I have also held positions in sales, systems engineering, business development, et cetera. So one of the great things about product management is that by default, you are the competitive intelligence specialist because you have to understand your competitors better than anybody else, their marketing, their go-to-market motions, their pricing. And so for me, coming from that type of environment into CI and MI as a default really was an extension of that experience. I'm glad to be here.
Terrific. Thanks for joining us again, Jay. And joining us as well is Katriana Oldershaw. Katriana, would you please share with us some of the highlights of your background?
Sure. Well, thank you for having me. I was fascinated by the discussion that's just been just finished. So looking forward to this very much. So I'm Katriana Oldershaw. I'm co-founder of the Insights Distillery, which is a specialist social media intelligence consultancy. And we work with clients who are in competitive intelligence roles, but also across broader consumer insights roles in big brands. My entry into this world, I guess, of competitive intelligence was around 10, 11 years ago, where I was managing director of a social media monitoring company called Cynthia. And it was in the startup stages, in the very early stages of that whole social media monitoring piece. And then more recently have set up the Insights Distillery, 6 years ago, because what I saw was that there was a proliferation of technology in the space, but there was a lack of the skills and the people to actually take all of that data and bring it to life. And that's something I feel quite strongly about, which no doubt will come up in the discussion, but that's me anyway.
Terrific. Thank you, Katriana. And Christophe Bisson, who is a professor, and so he's representing the academic community as well as a startup as well. So Christophe, would you please introduce yourself?
Yes, so I did a PhD where I developed some platform as a monitoring platform. By chance, we got a lot of money from the French Ministry of Research. And then after, I shifted to some hybrid system, augmented intelligence. And recently, we developed a platform that makes some models of strategic environment and makes some scenarios for the short, mid, and long run. And beside that, I also lead a program in Paris and I lecture also in Raleigh on the NC State campus.
Fabulous, fabulous. And many of us will also know Christophe's work too, through Skipward, in which he's published, his research as well as in academic journals and so forth. So I appreciate all of you joining us. And so let's dive right in. So yesterday in day one, we covered a broad swath of topics, right? Anything, from multimodal AI toolkits to the changing scope of OSINT and challenges and benefits, in the platform environment and developing trust in advanced technology and what we can expect in 5 to 10 years, a whole broad swath of topics that probably has been pent up, I think, within the Intel community. And we also see too that as we were sort of going far and we were looking out at all of the universe of tools and the promises, we were brought back down to reality a little bit in our last session, where our colleagues talked about where we are and where we go from here. And so as we're trying to maintain that constant tension, right, of the current realities as well as what is coming, what are your impressions at this point, in terms of where we are and where we're headed? And if you want to also get into prognosticating and thinking about where CI is evolving with technology, please be my guest.
Who wants to start?
Sorry, Christophe?
I said, who wants to start? Okay, yes. So I might be thought-provoking, but I think that, if we just use the tools and apply the OODA loop, of course, we'll reach some limitation as some guys raised, and they're really right. So it means that we need technology this artificial intelligence that is real now is more or less more machine intelligence, but it's a great help to make some automatic, gathering, to make some process, extract some knowledge, and to categorize. For example, when you use social media, they categorize the guys. So they emphasize as well the power of communities. So when you use Facebook, based on what you like, you don't like, what you write, what you add as a picture. So based on that, they put you in some categories, and we can see that in many different algorithms. So that's the fact. So at the end of that, of course, we need some human intelligence to analyze, to interpret, to analyze, to make some, to propose some decisions to some guys. So that's of course we need that nowadays. There is too much data, but I would say, of course, we reach some limitations. But after, I might be a bit. I think that if we want to go to the next step, based on my experience, we need to equip the people with some backgrounds regarding the machine learning, regarding artificial intelligence, and also ideally, we can even go further. The guys can learn our language, Python, and there is a convergence between the two languages nowadays. Or an intermediate position might be also to use some low-code platform, allowing the guys to address some complex system using some artificial tools. But of course, there is a black box, but that's already nice. And I can see that in my program, this is what we are doing nowadays. And of course, I encourage my students to go further.
Mm-hmm.
But we can go much further. But okay, I will stop now.
Well, so I just want to drill in a little bit here to what you're saying, because I think there are some implications here, right? So what we're talking about here, if we're talking about learning R or Python, as you mentioned, or combination, or even if it's low code, we are talking to some degree about reskilling, right, for the future, or
Indeed.
expanding our
Yeah,
skills.
of course.
How far should we go as Intel practitioners in that?
Yeah, if we want to democratize artificial intelligence, we need to speak the same language. It means we need to enlighten the decision makers, and therefore we need some guys who understand and speak the same language to understand their needs. If you understand the problem, it's 80% of the solution. But at the same time, if we want to use the power and the intelligence of the machine that is growing, and this is real, we need as well to be able either to use some simple tools like that, or we need at least to be able to communicate these guys, because these technologists, these pure technologists, they in general understand nothing regarding marketing, sales, or even more about strategy. And that's why if we want to go further and really unleash the potential, this is the direction. I believe that this is where we should go. And my vision is really to reconcile strategy and technology in the frame of strategy and competitive intelligence.
Yeah. And I just want to make a note, though, for those of us, who, have been involved in this conversation. Our colleague JP Radichak has just mentioned that Facebook just a couple of minutes ago announced it is rebranding as Meta. So hot off the presses here. So I guess, heretofore we will be referencing them as Meta. Well, it's still Facebook to us, at least for this purpose of this event and recording, I think. But so let's get back to that. And so Jay, you've just finished talking, about where we are and where we go, right, in the last panel. And so, given what we're discussing about the intersection of Intel and CI and the skill sets that are required to get us, from here, to the near future and perhaps, even further out, as a practicing manager, within a tech firm, and you're working with people, dealing with people, what is your vision? What is your take on this, and what paths do you recommend for the practitioner?
Great question there, Cynthia. And by the way, bonsoir, Christophe.
Bonsoir.
See, I know a little bit of French. I mean, very small, but I think the things like really smart people like Christophe are working on is great, and it holds a tremendous amount of promise. From a practitioner standpoint, we've been talking about over the last day, low code, no code. And I think, part of what we're going to have to kind of feel our way around as we go forth is I think that holds a lot of promise. On the other hand, the person who develops the code needs to have a variety of parameters which are tunable, because something, let me just give you a really easy example. I have a Ring camera on the outside of my house. I can adjust the sensitivity to motion. And so there needs to be parameters within that I can tune and make adjustable for my organization and what we're looking at, and that can change over time. So as we get more familiar with a particular market space or particular set of competitors, we may want to change the sensitivity of what's coming out there. So as we get more experience, we may actually invite more noise into it to try and see what's coming out. But, part of the problem today is that I think a management issue is going to be for me and my team, for example, as this technology comes out, is trying to really figure out what is useful, how it can be used and leveraged within an organization. Because, if you go downstream, people are looking for the results of that investigation. They're looking for insights. And, part of our job is to make sure we're, not 100% accurate, but we need to be accurate enough that whatever actions we recommend are the right ones. And so that's going to be a challenge from my standpoint.
Yeah. And so when we're talking about the human element, and just some of what Christoph is saying about how we should be expanding our skill sets in this new environment of advanced technologies, what do you and Catriona, please weigh in as well, because you're very much aware of the human element here. What do you recommend, as a potential outline towards this roadmap that we should have as Intel managers and Intel practitioners, right? Because going back to our keynote, where Rishad had said, devote an hour every day to learning. Right. So what should we be learning in that hour towards CI, assuming that we're devoting that hour, to CI.
See, I think people tend to think of themselves as words people or data people, Excel or PowerPoint type people. And I think you see in some school systems that people, for example, think they're no good at maths, and they just sort of cut themselves off. And I think China is an example of a country which shows everybody can be good at maths. It's kind of a mind thing. I'm a word person, a picture person. But the world is full of data, full of big numbers. But the reason I like social data is it's words, it's pictures. But I think the skill set you need really is storytelling. And I don't want it to sound like, just a marketing kind of cool thing to say, but I think what CI professionals need to be able to do is be almost like the triage nurse between the big numbers, the big data, and the senior execs. And you have to take it, translate it, tell a story that is memorable, that really cuts through. Because if something's memorable, then it's actionable. Then a senior exec, when they're making a decision, will remember that, tweet that you've put forward as an example, or those numbers, or that visualization. So I think to actually drive change and be strategic as a CI practitioner, you need to be able to communicate, articulate. I think you need to build a team around you to recognize what your strengths and weaknesses are if you've got the budget and the availability. I mean, people who are good at data visualizations and infographics are like gold, because if they can pull together numbers and put it in a way that people can see the meaning from, that's brilliant. The other thing I would say is I think tech providers need to do a better job of the interfaces that they're building for normal people, for us. And I remember at Cynthia, a lot of these tools use Boolean, which is, what we use, most people use when they do Google searches. They'll put quotation marks around a whole phrase, or and in capital letters. But to really use these tools, you have to become quite a ninja at it. But one of the most popular things that we had that made us win deals was something we developed called Flash Dash, which is where you could just put words in, push a button, and you got top line results. And that was it was just very simple. It wasn't all the bells and whistles. It wasn't all of the widgets. It wasn't configuring stuff. But it was a bit of a game changer for us. It's literally what won us pitches when we were in this competitive environment. And what I would say is that if you as a CI practitioner are able to engage with technology companies and explain how you want to be able to access the data, what makes it easier for you, I think they should be doing a better job of kind of bringing the data to you, and you are the people who then, yes, you need to be number literate, you need to be comfortable, but you're almost like the triage nurses that then work out whether something needs to go out to the senior execs or whether, there's a sort of business as usual in terms of what your listening posts are telling you. But that's
So-
my
So what I'm hearing in each of what you're saying is that in your various perspectives, we're increasingly needing to become better mediators, better bridgers, right? The intermediaries between the advanced technology and the users, even when it comes to not just in terms of the development of it, which is where Christoph has been coming from, but Katrina, you're talking about the product end, where at each of these ends and points in between, we need to be able to help translate this for the user. We need to be able to connect the user to even help enhance those stories where there are gaps, right? Is that about right? And I see, Christoph, you have your hand up.
Yeah, because I think it's very important for the field to understand this algorithm. For example, Catriona talks about Google. Google is using 57 variables to customize the result. Therefore, so if each of us, we make a research now about the same topic, we will not see the same result. Okay. But now I'm in Berlin. But anyway, so that's something that's why it's very important. And we need to understand this black box because this will impact your perception, therefore your decision, and then your action. So that's important. First point. Regarding AI, with the research we did with ACIP, it was sent to ACIP, some selected ACIP members, and it was about digital transformation intelligence. And the results were very interested and have been considered as disruptive on some aspect. But one of them, we demonstrate that the guys who are very close to the decision makers that are automatically invited to the meetings and that are using AI tools these companies are the ones which are the most agile. And then since the COVID-19 with the black swan, of course, if companies are agile, the better chance they have to be more competitive. And of course, it's gaining ground because we need to enter more variables into the system. For example, I used to use support vector machine, but I think that for this kind of matters, nowadays it's by very far not enough. So we need to use very complex models, enter a lot of data if we want to achieve sustainability, because now we reach really big challenges regarding the climate urgency, but not only. I mean, the guys who work in the supply chain, they cry every day nowadays because they face an amazing challenge. So this is no longer the same job. And that's why we need to have very big complex system models, which much more variables, and then therefore related to much bigger volume of data. And therefore, if we use only the machine for that purpose, I think there will be some problems. But then the solution to go further is to combine at some parts of the decision chain people and on other ones machine. And also it will be an obligation. Why? Because also Forrester last year, they released a survey where they emphasized that 60 to 73% of data are not used in companies. So in the coming years, with the new technology, it's obvious that we will prefer toward 100%. Therefore, we need a new paradigm to address this high uncertainty, very fast-moving environment with a lot of threats. And also, if we want to be competitive, and of course, and keep in mind that also we should make something and like the strategy, but of course, strategies that should be sustainable.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And what would such a paradigm look like?
So currently, what I'm working on building a kind of brain to dive into the big data and to guide into like an invisible hand to dive into the super big data, because we know that potentially for strategy, small data is enough, but you need to know it. Okay, so it will help us to anticipate, and of course, anticipation is at stake nowadays because business as usual, I think, is more and more challenged in many different aspects. So that's why we need this new mindset to be future also, to have to think about the future. So CI used to be very short-term minded. We need to think about what can be next, longer perspective. So we need to think and integrate automatically the foresight. About the time perspective as well, we need to be very careful because what used to be the long term yesterday is today short term. The demonstration is the vaccine against the COVID-19 because 10 years yesterday, today 1 year. So that what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to build some dynamic systems. So it means the model is always updated by combining some human perspective, human expertise, human intelligence, augmented by machine. So this is what we are doing, and we make some projection all the time dynamically for the short, mid, and the long run. And this is also what help any organization, based on my experience in different fields. It helps organization to bulletproof their strategy. So, this is what I'm doing.
Yeah, yeah. And foresight is very much at the top of mind, right? We're living in a volatile, complex, uncertain, ambiguous world, Catriona and Jay, where does what is your vision, for foresight in terms of advanced technology and how we can leverage that now and in the future?
Go ahead, Catriona.
I think I get a lot of clients where speed to insight is the nirvana, right? And then beyond that, it's the predicting. And I think actually right now, because data collection has been and analysis has been happening for quite a while now, one way that you can't necessarily predict the future, but as something unfolds, whether that's a competitor launching a new product or a news announcement that sort of breaks out there, benchmarking it against the typical data spread from past instances can very quickly help you to see that this is a situation where escalation is required or a really rapid response is required from your organization, or whether you can basically just say, calm down, dear, it's fine, actually. And we know from looking at the past patterns of this, there'll be this arc and then it will ease off. So I think some companies are managing to do that now, which isn't predictive, but it's kind of in the moment. But the way you do that is you have to model your past data. You have to have a really good handle on it. But once you've kind of got that model, then as each new thing gets plugged in, occurs, it's much easier to have a fast idea of what's happening, how big. Yeah, so benchmarking, I think, is a really key thing. Which sort of takes you almost to predicting stuff, but it definitely, this expectation we all have now is to have instant access to know everything that's happening, to know that Facebook have just announced that they're called Meta. That's what so the predictive thing, I think, is, that's what everybody would love to do, but in life we can't do that. So
and for foresight, of course, and it also incorporates an element of imagination too, right? Because it's not just about prediction, but it's also about some of the possibilities that we could be imagining and finding touchstones and signals for. And so, Jay, I want to just turn this conversation over to you now, and because you're at Dell and working with the realities of this every day.
Yeah, I'll echo what Catriona said about predictive. I think that's, everybody. So imagine this. It's like the movie with Tom Cruise, right? Minority Report. And people want you to move stuff around on the screen. And, here's what my competitor's going to do, announce this year. And here's where they're going to be spending your money. Everybody wants to know that. And of course, if we had that today, I think a number of us on this in this session would use that to predict the next winning lottery ticket and retire somewhere. But given that that's probably not a reality, the predictive side is really important. And I think, like I said previously, there are a number of tools out there today. We've done some proof of concepts. So the big thing that we did as an internal proof of concept proved that predictive could really actually make headway, but it's still very manually intensive and labor intensive. Is we took several of our competitors. We took all the data from something called the Common Crawl. And for those of you not familiar with the Common Crawl, it's basically a monthly snapshot of everything in the World Wide Web. And it's put in this huge database. So what we were able to do is we mined out certain information from our competitors. We then parsed all the data. And, we did this within AWS. So it's a huge amount of processing. You have to get down to, meaningful words like bigrams and trigrams, which are, two-word combinations like data protection, or, if it's a trigram, it might be cloud data protection, anything like that, and get rid of all the useless words. But from there, then you have to start applying mathematical formulas and heuristics to it and figure out what's trying to do. And for us, that initial POC was really focused around, could we duplicate, what's kind of been an industry harbinger or bellwether on what companies are doing, which is the Gartner Magic Quadrant. Sometimes affectionately referred to as the magic quadrant of death, but depending upon your point of view. But what we were able to do was basically replicate what they were doing. So, from a modeling standpoint, we knew that there was the ability, and great guys like Christoph are working on this to actually figure out these predictive things. But then it comes into a point that I know is near and dear to your heart there, Cynthia, which is, what about the bias behind it? How does that affect what's going into these modeling? And so that's, it's part of this ongoing evolution of how do we get there and what things affect that.
Yeah. And I see that, in our conversations in this summit, in this particular one as well, it just requires that the Intel practitioner pays attention to, a number of different disciplinary subject matter to be able to keep these systems going and to be able to grow these systems, right? What does this mean in terms of the competencies for the Intel practitioner going ahead, right? Because Christoph kicked us off by talking about coding and programming, and Catriona talked about storytelling, right, and the human element, and having the manager guide us. And Jay, you're talking about mathematics, and of course biases, right, which is now we're talking about cognitive science. It just seems that we're really at the intersection not just of technology and CI, but technology, CI, and a whole host of other elements. So how does the Intel practitioner prepare oneself for this future? How do we not just optimize the technology, but optimize our own performance, right, within this current environment and the environments that we're heading into? And with this, I'm going to ask you to kick us off again, Jay, and we'll go around.
Sure thing. So I think it's a challenge, and the problem is not everybody is knowledgeable about things like Python. They may be able to spell it, and some of them think it's actually some type of serpent or reptile. But at some level, everybody needs to be on board. It's like any other type of technology and set of tools and evolution of technology, which is you have to be at least aware of what's going on. You have to understand the lingo, understand at least the implications of what the technology can do and how to use it. Doesn't mean that you're going to use it yourself, but part of this is also developing an ecosystem around you, whether your peers or people on this session like Catriona and Christoph, where you can call in the people who have had this experience and the brains to answer questions, because you may have a hypothesis and say, okay, here's what we're trying to do. Here's our inputs. Here's our variables. Here's what we're looking at. But I don't know how to do it. Is this even possible? And then, so if I were to call up Catriona and say, hey, here's the things that we're looking at, she can give me a well-informed opinion. Now, that doesn't relieve the burden off of us having to do it, but you can't have that discussion unless you understand the basics of it. And, that's where we as practitioners here have to learn to bridge that gap between the technology and the science to the practical side of it. But we can't have that intelligent conversation unless we actually understand it. So to me, with my team, I always encourage them to at least be aware of it, do some reading on your own. And part of that, I think, is part of what's being a criteria to be a successful CI person, is you have to have almost this insatiable appetite for knowledge, whether it be about your competitor, whether it be about the industry. I think this what we've been doing yesterday and today is a great example of always wanting to expand your horizons. And, as Rashid talked about earlier, Rashad, as he talked about that earlier, is that you need to, have that appetite so you don't, basically die on the vine intellectually.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And Catriona, let's just, we'll bring it back to you to build on this about the competencies. And, so how do we think about competencies in this new environment, right? Which competencies do we retain? Which competencies do we need to expand into, right? Some that have not yet, been added, to what we've accepted as CI competencies.
Well, see, I think if you're in CI, you tick the big box, which is you're a curious person, right? And I think what you also, if you're in a senior role within your organization, what you already have, which you shouldn't underestimate the value of, is a strategic knowledge or understanding of your business. That's, to me, the hardest skill set to develop, and it actually takes time and experience and being involved across a business or multiple businesses, because you need to know what you're trying to achieve with whatever analysis you're doing. You need to know what type of business decision is going to inform how your business operates before you even embark on investing in some use of technology, some tool to tell you stuff. And to me, that's incredibly valuable. And I think if you've got that, I think some people, if they don't have a technical background, it's almost like an imposter syndrome. They think, oh, I can't, I'm blagging it. I'm in a room, I'm nodding my head, but I don't understand what my supplier is telling me or what somebody's in my tech team saying. Ask the question. And those people, surround yourself with suppliers who can talk in your language, is what I would say. And if they can't explain, you need to be able to find a common language, because you need to be able to explain your objective, what you're actually trying to achieve. And you do need to know how to ask the right questions, because as Christoph said, this idea of bias, and I mentioned benchmarking and predictive stuff. If the model is wrong, you just can't end up replicating the same thing, like Amazon's recruitment AI system notoriously a few years ago was just reinforcing the status quo, which is not what they wanted. So, but honestly, I would really, I can't program in Python. I do know it's a programming language and not just something on that Joe Exotic might have. But honestly, the best people I work with on client side and organizations are curious. They want to innovate. They're interested in understanding what tech can do for them or what data can do for them, but they don't need to know it all. They need to engage with people. And I think if I had a budget, if I was in a big organization, what I would be looking for is to partner with early-ish stage startup-y type tech companies, ones that haven't really nailed down what they're selling, if that makes sense. They might have some really cool natural language processing tech that can pull out themes from a massive data. They are looking for a customer. They are looking, is it customer experience? Is it competitive intelligence? Is it something? If you can find those companies, and I remember in the early days of Synthesio, some of our best projects were with clients where we built stuff with them to work for their business, and then we could productize that, and that's when the VCs love it, because you're making money in your sleep and it's all the tech and there are less humans involved from their perspective. But yeah, don't underestimate how much some of these tech companies want to work with you, and don't be afraid to ask what you think you might perceive as a silly question, because it isn't, and people should be able to communicate with you. So that's what I would. That's what I feel quite strongly about, really.
No, and I completely identify with that, because I've actually have worked with some of those when working in natural language processing, and discussing how there are use cases for Intel and so forth. So you're spot on there, and so I'd like to now turn to Christophe, back to you, because you are building these tools, and so how do you recommend Intel practitioners to work with people who are technical, because we can't all possibly be technical, right? Even if we can carve out the time, to learn R or Python, it's not necessarily the sensible thing to do for each of us. So,
Sure.
So how does the non-technical Intel practitioner collaborate with those who are technical, towards that future?
Yeah. For example, when you fine tune the data, so when we regarding the hyperparameters, it's more art than science. So therefore, the technical guys they need the feedback from the professional, and the CI guys who can be of great help for that matters. I think that as well, reinforcement learning is going to gain ground. So that's why it's continuous feedback from the professionals. So this is where, for example, you can buy some tools, and then you can make some tailoring and add some stones to go further regarding the analysis and and create added value, and get some potential competitive advantage, because all these tools, of course, are commodities, and if you want to get some competitive advantage based on that, either you make a bespoke and you develop everything by yourself, or you can make tailoring, or the use at least is going to be better. So, but yeah, the CI guys can do a lot for that, and I think that to go a bit further will not require a lot of trainings, and it could be of great help. But of course, after there is a lot to be done, and as Jay said, with Minority Report, we are not yet there, because by definition, anyway, to predict the future is impossible. So we prefer towards the impossible, but we need as well to be aware of these changes. There is a real machine intelligence, but we need to be aware as well that nowadays the conditions are much more challenging than they used to be, and therefore we need to go further. And this is what I'm trying to do, and training some educating, making some collaboration with companies, some organization. But I think that we need to go further, because if not, as the surveys of Forrester demonstrated, we need some guys who are helping companies to tackle the super big data. And yesterday it was 73% of the data that are non-used, but in the coming years it will be, of course, much more. So that's why we need to address the pivot, and we need to change.
Yes, and and as we're winding down here, in our time for this session, what would you say, are what do you foresee as areas of the greatest advancement, in the foreseeable future? Where should we be looking at? Because what I see is, that might also be where we need to focus our energies to help shape that area of advancement, right? We have the greatest opportunities there as intelligence practitioners. So what would each of you recommend here? And so I'll just start with Catriona again, and we'll go around.
Well, I think the type of data that interests me most is I'd say is unstructured. So words and images, not structured as in numbers. And I think the advances in being able to understand unstructured data are really exciting. So that is natural language processing, it is thematic analysis, but it's also image recognition, because then you can start to feed in big numbers. And I guess what you can reach for is qualitative outputs or analysis at quant scale, which is the way I sort of think of social media. And that's where you get this idea of the quali dolly. Oh, you've talked to your 2 people and found out X, versus the quant guys with all the data. It's actually becomes one thing. You've got masses of data, but it's unstructured. I think that's where there's really exciting stuff coming up with, abilities of machines to understand text, free-flowing text, and images in particular, and video. Because that's what brings to life the insight, the understanding of your marketplace, what your competitors are doing, and how customers are reacting to that.
Mm-hmm. So we should be keeping an eye on that area, learning more about it. Yeah, so we can maybe create more opportunities there. And Christophe, and we'll then wind down with Jay.
Yes, for the future. So yes, reinforcement learning, Edge AI also will gain ground. So that's why as well we need to, it's also in parallel with empowerment, because it will be more local computation. And we need, of course, I think that we need to focus more perhaps on augmented strategic and competitive intelligence and reconcile the gap between the strategists and the technologists. And that will be a great help to go further. And as I said, to help companies to be competitive and also in a sustainable way. So nowadays, that's very important. I encourage you as well to, Yale recently updated some prediction from MIT, Club of Rome. So it's a reality. So now we have to address this upheaval. So yeah.
Yeah, and you recommended the new paradigm as well, right? As
Yes.
an area that we need to be focused on. So yes, thank you. And Jay, do you want to round off this portion of the discussion?
I like the idea of the unstructured data, because I think most of our world is turning into unstructured data today anyway, or it's mainly that anyway. And so it's really trying to make sense of all these, at times, what seems to be very disparate data points. I think that's where AI can help and machine learning can help, is to help filter out that noise. So it's really, my opinion is that you're never going to, probably not within my lifetime, actually have machines that can do it for you, but they can cut out a substantial amount of the upfront filtering and processing time. And, maybe we can get to August calendar bot within this lifetime.
Yes. And so here, then let's just go around and we'll just we'll just get your thoughts, just some final thoughts about this. What do you want us to leave with, from this panel, from this session? And so, Christophe, do you want to start us off? And you're muted, yeah.
Yeah, so I think that so I really encourage the professionals not to be afraid and equip themselves of some additional technical knowledge and make the bridge between technology and the decision makers to provide augmented strategic and competitive intelligence at first, and then we can go beyond, and we need to address all these challenges. So this is my humble recommendation.
Thank you, Christophe. And Jay.
Yeah, I'm actually pretty excited about the future. I think, for the first time, in like I said, this is really coming from a perspective of where I came from in product management through competitive intel now, is I think for a lot of companies, CI is starting to get a table at that executive table where our input is being requested, it's actively being solicited, and there's going to be a lot of hurdles that go along with that. There's going to be a lot of expectations that we're going to have to face off. But I think, if we approach it with a positive outlook and use technology in a manner prescribed that could be useful, Yeah, as was stated earlier, and something Catriona also mentioned, we are narrative engines, and I think that's what the business is looking for from us, is how to make those changes that affect the business, and hopefully other parts of other reactions from that to help society at large.
Great, thank you. And Catriona, do you want to finish this off?
Yeah, just to echo, it's very exciting times. I would just say, don't be daunted. It can feel daunting, but actually, as I say, I think most people listening will have the hardest skills to develop already. And so this is about surrounding yourself with good team members, good suppliers who fill the gaps in terms of your knowledge. And you'll be surprised how quickly you will become comfortable and au fait and able to talk about things. The more you get involved and ask questions, before you know it, you will actually be innovative, and it will have developed incrementally. You would have built out your skill set. So no imposter syndrome. That's banned. You can do it. And partner with the people who can speak your language and help you build that bridge between the data and the senior execs.
Yeah, thank you all very much for this, and taking us towards the future, our futures, with advanced technology. And so just to round things off, it underscores the importance of the human element in storytelling and narratives and networking and learning, and helping our own colleagues in various other aspects of our organization navigate and negotiate through this new reality as well. Because as we're learning to adapt to these technologies and to adopt these new technologies, as are they. And so we have a place in that. We need to define our place in that and make that clear, and just continue to learn and to expand our competencies in these areas. So thank you each very much.